Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Youngman, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Central Delaware County. On behalf of our league, I want to thank you for joining us for this webinar called Post-Election Day Certification and Potential Legal Challenges. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization which neither supports nor opposes candidates, but does encourage informed and active participation in citizenship, elections, and democracy. We also work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. One of the ways we help fulfill our mission to empower voters and defend democracy is to offer presentations to inform the public about the importance of exercising your right to vote. Today's program, coordinated through our Civic Education Committee, is a good example of informing communities about vital issues that impact our league mission. This presentation is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel and shared with all those who registered. The panel will be moderated by Jamie Mogul, election lawyer and president of the League of Women Voters of Lower Marion Narberth. Jamie is an election integrity and voting rights expert and will introduce our presenters and moderate the panel. Jamie?
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you to your league, our sister league, Central Delaware County. As Kathy said, I'm the president of the Lower Marion and Narberth League, and I got to stop talking because I got to get to our great panel. I'm just going to do a quick introduction for them, but I also want people to know just some kind of tech specs that you're on here today. There is a chat. We know that people have given questions. We do want to say also we're going to do a poll, so stay tuned for that after the introductions, and then we're going to do it again afterwards with respect to all the great things we're going to hear today. And then also, if you'd like to stay on afterwards to just have a chat, you're welcome to do that, and that will not be part of the recorded programming. So I'll get right to it because we have an amazing group of panelists. I want to thank them for being here. First, we have Marian K. Schneider. She's a lawyer with the ACLU of Pennsylvania as the Senior Policy Counsel for Voting Rights. Done some incredible work. I would be here much longer than an hour to tell you all that great work. But I also want to introduce Jill Greene, former State League Executive Director, but now with Common Cause PA and oversees the voting and elections there as the manager of that. And then with us, we're fortunate to have Jim Allen, or James Allen officially, and he is the elections director for Delaware County, or as you maybe hear me say it, Delco, Monco, or as we colloquially call them here. So I want to thank all of them for being here and kind of get right into it because there is so much to discuss, and I want to thank everybody who submitted questions for us. I want to start, I'm thinking just broadly, and maybe to go with Jim specifically, because first, let me just thank you for your often thankless job, which is a nonpartisan job as an elections director, but has unfortunately been very politicized. So thank you for sticking it out and doing all this great work to make democracy work. So maybe you can tell us just right off the bat. Oh, I'm going right into it, but I first forgot the poll. So Kathy, before I get into it, we have heard so much about, and even myself, I admit it, even doing all this work, I get nervous about elections. So we're going to actually ask you, how you're feeling about that election. And then we're going to ask you again after you've heard from our great panelists. And even if it's, changed a little bit in the right direction, I think that's a good sign. So please take a look at this poll and answer that for us. And then I'm going to get back to you asking you, Jim.
Can you see the poll?
Yes, hopefully everybody can see the poll.
Good, we're getting responses.
Okay, polls being submitted. And Kathy, you can keep getting answers, right, while I go to
Yes.
Jim? Okay, so Jim, back to you, and still thank you for your work. Maybe you can tell us, you've been in this role for a while. I have followed you. I live in Monco, but I'm in Haverford, so close to Delco, and have worked with people there. Maybe you can tell us some of the things you're doing in your plan in 2024 to ensure, some people feel good about the integrity of their vote while not doing at the expense of access to voting as you administer the election. So maybe just kind of a rundown. I know it's probably a lot, but things you definitely want the public to know.
Well, Jamie, thank you first off for having me here today, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and for all the work that all of you contribute to informing voters and making sure that they have access to the ballot box by way of registering to vote or showing up on election day or getting instructions on what the candidates might stand for. Some of the things that we can't really do, especially when it comes to informing people about what the candidates may or may not stand for. We're there 365 days a year, whether people realize or not, uh, managing a system that is the weirdest business model in perhaps the history of business models. And in every jurisdiction across the United States, it's pretty much the same. There is a small group of people relative to the size of the jurisdiction, in our case, about 38, who work full time to be ready to explode out to 70 individuals closer to election day, and then ultimately 2,400 individuals in Delaware County alone on election day to open up 428 franchises and then staff those franchises that we call precincts with people who do this with a little bit of training ahead of each election, hopefully, but basically actually perform this task on a grueling day 2 times a year. And at the same time, as the voting public, we expect everything to come out perfectly just fine within about 2 hours after the close, before there's been any kind of review or audit. Imagine doing that with banks or Burger Kings or any other kind of franchise where you're just going to open up and do the people's business for one day or 2 days out of the year, entirely with a group of volunteers who take this assignment very seriously and are very dedicated to getting it right, but nonetheless are only doing it those 2 days. That's America's election system. So what's unique though in the last year is that we're facing all kinds of unprecedented headwinds. We have a social media outlet 4 years ago that was accused of enriching election authorities to try to accede to its will, when in fact there was enormous latitude at the election authorities. This is Facebook giving money down through a civic organization. And that allowed a lot of jurisdictions around the country to buy equipment to get through running the first ever election in a pandemic, or the first modern election in a pandemic with super high turnout. There were no real strings attached. There was no dictate. You had latitude to spend it on everything from PPE to equipment to whatever your jurisdiction needed, and it went to Democratic and Republican jurisdictions alike. However, there's been legislation approved since then that forbids that kind of donation or donation of services. So in lieu of that, the state has created what's called the Election Integrity Grant to help offset the costs of these newer programs. Meanwhile, at this election, we have a different social media outlet, Twitter, which they sent a representative to a meeting with us and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency in Philadelphia. Several election officials met there. And the people from Google, the people from Meta presented what it would take to help take down misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
And the people from Twitter X got up there and said, we're not going to take it down.
Right. Well,
We're
wait,
going
I
to
know
leave it up.
we're
So that's
gonna,
the headwind we're facing now,
yeah.
along with just endless litigation.
And I do want to we're going to talk more later about myths and disinformation because unfortunately that is not gone away. I believe it's only escalated. But I want to ask specifically, as you administer, as each of the respective 67 counties in Pennsylvania do our elections, what specifically, like I know you've worked around chain of custody to secure that around, and that means with the ballots to make sure, or because I know there's misinformation about that, or even having the e-poll books, electronic poll books. I'm just bringing up some of the things that I know that you've done. Or even I heard, which I think is fantastic, like you have de-escalation techniques for your training of poll workers. So, I mean, these are things that, I think the public should know. I mean, is there anything else, or maybe you want to highlight those just specifically so people can feel, there are things being done.
The mantra here has been to make all the necessary changes in a steady process over the last 3 years, all the way up until the most recent primary. So probably the biggest change we rolled out starting in 2023 with a handful of precincts and then about 40% of the precincts. And then in the primary this past April, all 100% of the precincts were the electronic poll books. And the reason is simple. We wanted to gear up so that we have the technology that we all use now. When we look up a phone number, we go to this device. We don't go to a phone book. And we were using phone book technology, phone books that are outdated the minute they're printed, which were our paper poll books. Now we have electronic poll books. You have access to look up and help any voter who arrives in the wrong polling place and get them to the right polling place and give consistent instructions to every voter. So we're very excited about that. That allows for the check-in process to go faster because we had to gear up for a higher turnout election. We also, in analyzing the data, determined that a lot of people who voted by mail in 2020 were not going to do so. And that's based on, we saw more than 30,000 individuals just in Delaware County who voted by mail and returned their mail-in ballot or absentee ballot in 2020, but chose to vote in person in the 2022 general election. So coming out of the pandemic, it's clear that a lot of people are going to return to our polling places. So we're supplying them with more booths. We're also focusing right now on you mentioned the try to de-escalation training to try to bring down the temperature if anybody tries to raise it in the polling place. So we've woven that into every one of our in-person instructions. We're also going to offer a special section coming up for just judges of election and minority inspectors. It's an in-person training with a representative of the cybersecurity infrastructure and security agency. So he's going to be presenting at high school in media based on invitation only, and that's going to be coming up. We're very excited about that program.
Wow. So this is all really good. I think as we go, I mean, my whole goal, even with working with the league, is to just let people know straight from, and I'm not calling you horses, but like straight from the horse's mouth, from the people who are working and administering elections, that there is a process, there is a system, and it is 365 days a year. I mean, in Pennsylvania, we have elections every year, twice a year. There's certainly a lot going on. But I want to get to Marian and Jill, kind of from their perspectives, leading election protection, Jill, and then especially Marian with your work, the legal team at ACLU. What are you doing that you want people to hear about for, in a broad stroke? We'll get to more specifics about the plan for 2024 to protect the vote. So a short overview, if you can, that you really want people to hear. And then, I'm going to ask you more specifically on some things that we got questions about. So Jill, if you want to start us off.
Sure. And I want to thank the league for inviting us to come speak, and specifically Jamie. It is good to see you again. So again, my name is Jill Greene. I am the Voting and Elections Manager at Common Cause Pennsylvania, and I also manage the Pennsylvania Election Protection Poll Monitor Program. So election protection is a nonpartisan program. It's been around since 2002. We assist all voters, regardless of their political persuasion. I'm sure the members of the league will appreciate a nonpartisan position where we do not support, endorse, or oppose candidates or parties or campaigns. Our goal is entirely to make sure that every voter can successfully cast their ballot. We are the largest nonpartisan voter service coalition in the country. And in Pennsylvania, the coalition has grown to include over 80 organizations focused on working at the regional, state, and national levels to, not only help voters on election day and leading up to election day, but also to ensure that those ballots are counted and that we also work throughout the year on legislative and policy changes to improve access to the ballot and improve election administration. So we recruit hundreds of community members throughout the Commonwealth to help voters at their polling places on election day. That means we're community focused. This is kind of the most important link is that we are recruiting people to work in their own communities to assist their neighbors and make sure that they are able to cast their ballots.
Okay, and Marian, before you start, I do want to point out, and we'll get back to Jill, that we got a lot of questions about how can I help? How can I assist? And so I'm going to come back to you so that we can emphasize that and let people know when we email you back to that email you got for your registration link, we are going to have all the information about that great program, 866 Our Vote. You can even sign up now to be a poll monitor, or maybe you're a poll worker. So we want to thank you for doing that. So Marian, I'm going to turn to you. I know you probably have a lot. I know you're very busy that you're working on, but maybe just a few highlights of your plan of action from the ACLU's perspective in 2024 for protecting the vote.
Well, thank you to the League for inviting me. I really appreciate being here, and also thanks so much to the League for all of the work that you have done over the past 104 years. I just want to emphasize that ACLU is a national partner with the National Election Protection Coalition, and I always view that as one program within our broader voting rights work. We also just want to echo nonpartisan, nonprofit. We do not endorse or affiliate or anything with any partisan actors, no political parties or candidates. And I forget what the other thing I was going to say was, but anyway, we bottom line the command center for the Election Protection Coalition, and we work very closely with Jill in our preparations for that. There will be two command centers, one in Pittsburgh and one in Philadelphia. I will be the lead in Philadelphia. And we have there's a call center. There will be a state-specific call center taking the calls in Pennsylvania that is bottom lined by Blank Rome. It's a Philadelphia law firm. And when they can't resolve tickets, we get them at the command center, and we call people like Jim and say, Jim, did you know this was happening? And can you help us? And other things. But so that we're going to be the hotline, 866 Our Vote hotline is live. The Lawyers Committee has volunteers that are monitoring the hotline right now. We have started, we have lawyers who will be reviewing the tickets starting on Monday, because Monday's the voter registration deadline and the 29th is the application for mail ballot deadline. So we are expecting, we just want to be ready. So that operation will be happening on election day, but in the interim, we've been very aggressive with litigation to get clarity in the law around mail voting, and we are waiting on two decisions from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. These are kind of adjacent to mail voting. One is about when are provisional ballots to be counted, which we already litigated in Delaware County in the Cohen case. And the other is a constitutional challenge under the procedural due process, also adjacent to mail voting, but it says that if our claim, and we won at all levels in that case. Our claim is that if the county knows that there's a disqualifying defect on a mail ballot packet, and they know that as soon as it arrives that that's going to happen, that the procedural due process protections of the Pennsylvania Constitution require that the voter be told, and so that they can challenge that decision or that they can take other steps, such as preserving their voice through the provisional ballot process, which is not part of the cure. It is just a 22-year-old statutory failsafe to preserve the. So those are both fully briefed and waiting for decision from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And we have not given up on getting rid of enforcement of the meaningless date requirement. There is a case in the Commonwealth Court, an appeal out of Philadelphia County special election that continues the constitutional challenge under Pennsylvania's Constitution, that the free and equal clause of Pennsylvania Constitution prohibits enforcement of the meaningless date requirement on the envelope. So the Commonwealth Court has that, and we will just wait and just waiting.
Okay,
We
well,
talk about
thank
post-election stuff
you.
later.
But that actually leads me to thinking about how, for Jim and the other election directors in these counties, they're really plagued by issues that are completely out of their hands, a lot due to the lack of clarity in that election code, or changes that come after lawsuits that are filed in hopes to clarify, like Marian, you were saying, particularly around vote by mail, seems to be a massive target. I know I was fortunate enough to work with Jill and others on Act 77, which allowed vote in a short way, allowed, in highlight reel, allowed vote by mail by any eligible voter. So didn't mean that you needed to be absent for a work reason and couldn't vote in your respective county or voting place, but now any eligible voter. But it came and it was introduced in 2020, which was this perfect storm, this major election, COVID, et cetera. But these issues still, some of them still need clarity. Look, Marian just told us about what, 3 or more lawsuits, particularly around vote by mail. So I am going to ask, Jim and Marian, maybe you can tell us. I think you just mentioned, Marian, a couple things about the actual ballot and the requirements, but maybe even things like your perspective around drop boxes and satellite voter offices, which the code doesn't specifically delineate, right? Meaning the election code, the legislation, and the law, but it also doesn't bar them per se. So, Jim, maybe you can tell us a bit about, what's happening in Delco with respect to drop boxes and satellite offices, and then Marian, maybe follow up, on the, just anything more that you want to talk about, because I know ACLU has really been working to make sure people do have access, particularly to drop boxes. So, Jim, I'll ask you to let us know about Delco.
Well, before I arrived here in 2021, Delaware County built the most extensive drop box system in the Commonwealth, and we currently have 37. So it's an administrative lift, to say the least, to be able to make the pickups throughout that process and to make sure that the cameras are all functional and to respond to any kind of complaints that you might receive. But still, there are 2 things that I want to point out that are kind of misguided notions about drop boxes and their security. A, there are no cameras on the hundreds and thousands of U.S. Postal Service blue boxes. And so there are cameras on all of these drop boxes that are operated by the counties. Secondly, the majority of the ballot returns are still coming through the U.S. Postal Service. Thirdly, if you're a believer in chain of custody, which many of the critics claim to be, then you want the voter's ballot to go directly from the voter to the election authority. The drop box is the only way that that happens without it possibly being handled by a third party, the Postal Service or DHL or FedEx, and having it getting lost or arrive too late. Those things don't happen with these drop boxes. Lastly, I understand some people think that the Postal Service should be the only way you return it, but what about those last days, including Election Day? If we're allowing people to make up their mind up until Election Day and make return that ballot, we've got to allow them a drop box because the Postal Service just simply can't get it to us.
Yeah, Jim and Marian, one moment. I just want to clarify, Jim, you were kind of going over how I think what you meant, just so I'm sure and the viewers are sure, when you were saying about cameras and so forth, and you were saying that there were challenges that there needed to be certain security around the drop boxes
Mhm.
as compared to another form of or a place that you can, option to return your vote by mail ballot, which is the post office, right? Which,
Correct.
yes, it does. We just want to be sure people don't tamper with the mail, okay? Because that is, as
No,
Marian has pointed out, it's a federal crime. But right, we do. I like to tell people it's great that we have options, right? I often get told, well, like, I don't want to vote that way. Well, I just say, well, are you going to vote? And they say yes. And I said, well, great, you do you. That's great that we have choices. I will say around I'm in Monco and I feel very fortunate and I often, make a point of saying how grateful I am that I'm in a county that has a significant number of drop boxes. Not as many as Delco, but we also have a lot of these satellite voter offices because there are so many counties. Yeah, I mean, working with the league and talking with, my colleagues, everybody, we know that across Pennsylvania, especially these very rural areas that really could use a drop box, even just an option, right? Or to allow for the option for people with disabilities, or maybe they're working, maybe they're taking care of a dependent, or all of the above, that they have these options for voting. So, Mary, maybe I know you all worked on access to drop boxes.
Well, I just want to say this. I'll just note that Pennsylvania lags behind other states in making voting as convenient as possible. Many other states, especially in the southern states, where they were very much earlier by 20 years adopters of no excuse absentee voting, of in-person early voting, and many other features that Pennsylvania does not have access to. I think that the legislature could address many of these issues and could join the majority of states that make voting easier and with fewer barriers than we do in Pennsylvania. So we have a long way to go in Pennsylvania. And I think that the goal for those who work on election policy should be that we would like Pennsylvania to be the model that people look to as to how elections are run. And I know that the desire is there among many election directors, most election directors in Pennsylvania, but the legislature is where the problem lies. Having said that, the election code is silent on drop boxes. It is silent on satellite election offices, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has said that it is within the broad and discretionary powers of the counties to adopt those if they would like. And many have done so. And I really want to applaud Delaware County for their drop boxes. I know it's a big headache. I get it. I know you have to have a lot of people, but really, you guys do a great job. I live in Chester County, and I think your drop boxes are closer because I'm on the border. I mean, there are two that are like 5 minutes from my house in Delaware County. So, kudos to Delaware County for the drop boxes. We did work in Lebanon County to make sure they didn't get rid of theirs. Dauphin County has come yards away far ahead of where they were in 2020. Not only do they have multiple drop boxes, but they have a robust notice and cure program, as does Delaware County. So, I mean, we are seeing progress. It's just county by county. And then I mean, I don't know if uh, I'll just stop there, but I think that we are in a different place than we were in 2020 in terms of counties' comfort and practice with handling a mail ballot election. This will be the eighth election that counties have dealt with mail voting. And I think we have come a long way, and I feel very confident in the ability of counties to handle it.
I think just hearing that from you makes me feel better. So I hope it makes others feel better too. And I like that you pointed out that you're in Chester County and you would like to use a Dropbox, but you can't,
No, I
right?
can't. No, that's not what I'm
Right.
saying.
We want to
I'm
tell
saying, no,
people
Chester County,
only your
right,
own county, right? Because
right,
I
only Marian
live,
County.
yeah, Bryn
I was
Mawr.
just shouting out Delaware County for having so
No,
many.
no, I like it. It's a reminder to
My
people who are
Dropbox is at
watching.
Easttown Library. I can go to the Easttown Library if I want. I will drive mine to the election office, however, but that's just me.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, we did see in the chat and shout out to Amy Weinstrom, our great leader, our executive director of the PA League. She's mentioning that there are so many Western states, it's not only automatic voter registration, but everything is vote by mail. So we are a bit slow to progress here in PA, but we're making some progress. So I want to get back to some of the more specific questions on challenges that we got. And we've all brought it up also about the legislature, frankly, just not really doing their job, and they could clarify a lot of this. I know the County Commissioners Association, Jim, you've talked about this before, have repeatedly even like borderline begged them to clarify the law, especially regarding challenges and so forth. But maybe quickly, because we had certification on there, and I know for a lot of people, even myself included, January 6th, it is in the back of mind, but I think it's important for people to know like procedurally, what is certification? And then what does it mean, if there are challenges like delays to certification, even though delays will be inevitable. I want people to know that. It doesn't mean that the elections aren't working. It's actually the opposite, because you all can't even open a ballot, right, Jim, till election day, all those vote by mail ballots.
No.
So it doesn't mean there's a problem, but specifically on this certification, maybe just a quick overview for people. And then, what does it mean when there are challenges to that? Um, I'll let you take it away and then I'll ask more specific questions.
Well, the certification is actually just the formal procedure that occurs at least 5 days after the county has completed all the tasks related to reporting the initial results, getting the unofficial results a week after for review in case there's a need for a recount, going through the provisional ballots, counting the late arriving but on time sent UOCAVA military overseas ballots, also going through the initially non-verified mail and absentee ballots. If a person didn't apply with a valid ID, they're given a ballot, but it's not going to be counted until they provide valid ID, and they have up until the Monday after election day to do that. There are also post-election procedures such as going through the 2% audit and the work of the return board and the canvas to go through the results of every single precinct to make sure, okay, if we gave them 1,000 ballots and 700 people voted, there should be 700 people in the numbered list of voters. There should be 700 in the voter history. There should be 700 ballots cast, and there should be 300 left over that weren't used, minus any that were spoiled or remitted by the voters or replaced because of some kind of mistake or some kind of procedure on election day. So it's a matter of going through all the results and making sure that everything was buttoned down, and to make sure that when you reach that final process of counting the last provisional ballots, usually about 10 days after election day, then the Board of Elections needs to come together and then certify those results. And then there are 67 certifications that go to the Commonwealth, and the Department of State then, after receiving all those, has a certification process it follows to certify the statewide results. Looking
Okay, so
ahead to
it's
this election,
mainly procedural, right? It's not this like big, I think unfortunately this is an area of mis and disinformation, that it's like some big like conspiracy behind the doors type thing.
no, I mean, the processes before it are where you need to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and make sure everything was right. And then the certification itself is a ministerial act saying, we have done that, and these are our final numbers. So if there are lawsuits and other litigation about whether to count certain ballots or whether to exclude certain ballots or whether to recount any precincts or the entire state for that matter, that's to happen before the certification, but it should not delay the certification. At some point, the jurisdictions are required by law in Pennsylvania 20 days after election day to certify the results, no matter what the circumstances are. I want to emphasize, though, that there's a lot of focus on the swing states, and what a lot of people don't realize is that the same post-election activities are going on in Texas and Hawaii and California and Idaho days, if not weeks after election day, just as they are here in Pennsylvania. It's just that no one's paying attention because it's not even close. So they might be paying attention if there's a close statewide contest or something lower on the ballot, but that's going to be like local focus. So going back to Florida in 2000, all of us jurisdictions across the country were still, going through everything from 2000, but all the attention was on Florida because it was roughly 530, 570 votes apart, and that was going to decide the entire thing. So
Yeah, just so people, if they're not aware, even in law school, they say like election law, for us didn't really start till that Bush v. Gore, and that challenge over coming down, and people might even remember like all of that hand counting and so forth. But I think it's good for people who are on here to know, but what if you did, and we have had these situations, I know you're not going to have this in Delco, thank goodness. But there are other counties where you have those who are on the board of elections. Maybe they're even like, I know I'm not home rule, like, so in our county, the commissioners are also the board of elections. What if they did refuse to just do that ministerial, certification? I think there is that concern over it. But I think you brought up there's a rule, there's a law.
I'm going to respectfully decline to comment on persons who decide to abdicate their responsibilities. How's that?
Mhm.
I
Okay.
think when you have a duty under the law, you need to perform it, and you need to perform it correctly. And I think there should be, at the end of this election, fewer questions than there were in 2020, in part because all 67 jurisdictions, and this was alluded to earlier in the conversation, are much more familiar with the systems, have more experience with the systems, have beefed up equipment in many cases like we have, so that we should have the lion's share of the results, or at least our goal is by the 11 o'clock news. So, will there still be more to count from the last ballots to arrive either in the mail or the drop boxes or the last precincts to come in the door? Yes, but we're all going to be striving so that by midnight, decision desks around the different country, unless it's super, 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 super close, we'll have a good feel for what the results are. So I don't think this is going to drag on all the way until Saturday, when that's when the lion's share of the votes were counted in 2020.
So we do have, good or bad, we do have this kind of precedent or track record to look back on. I know that there were like two or three counties where unfortunately we did have a situation where they didn't certify, and then it went to the courts and they were told, yeah, you're abdicating your duty and this is certified and this must go through, which in turn goes through that electoral process. Our votes here in Pennsylvania are electoral votes going to and then being certified, at the federal level. I know that I should tell people there was bipartisan quick action on that Electoral Reform Count Act. So a lot of the things that maybe were weaponized in 2020, even 2022, have now been rectified or at least litigated to know that we have a framework. But Marian, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about from a legal perspective about challenges or so forth with respect to certification.
Well, I mean, I think that there is a little bit more clarity in the law. It's not as crystal clear as we would like. The 2022 counties that didn't certify, that was a very unique situation over a dispute about what a fractured Pennsylvania Supreme Court opinion meant, that the law is clarified now on that issue. So, but totally 100% agree with Jim that it's a mandatory duty, is non-discretionary, and there is a legal remedy for counties that fail to carry out a non-discretionary mandatory duty. Does that mean that everybody follows the law? No, but I think the majority of boards of election in Pennsylvania will do so. Um, I don't know if as far as, here's the thing. I think that I have spent a lot of time in my career in the democracy space involved with voting machines, because in 2018 Pennsylvania replaced, it's statewide, all of its voting systems. They are all supported by a paper record. Are they all the best that they could have gotten? No, but they're all supported by a paper record. And the point of that is that yes, computers can sometimes make errors, and yes, they can sometimes be programmed wrongly, but an audit of the paper records will detect that and you can correct it. I think it's extremely rare. I don't think it's going to happen. It didn't happen in 2020. I don't think it's going to happen now. Um, but so I think that the in 40 in 46 counties, voters mark a paper ballot with a pen, and that is scanned. And that those paper ballots are the best evidence of the voter's intent, and that can be audited, and you can detect whether the computers counted those properly. And I think people have to remember that, and that's what's true. Um, there's a question in the chat about the Electoral Count Reform Act. I basically took away it took away the ability to disregard slates of electors. I haven't looked at it in a couple of months, but it also took away the safe harbor concept. There's a deadline. The states must send the certificate of ascertainment of electors to Congress by December 11th. That's the deadline. And the Electoral College will meet December 17th this year. So it's really important to meet that deadline. If people want to, so the delay that could be caused by frivolous challenges or even by recount petitions could cause there's a possibility it could cause the state to miss that deadline. However, the Supreme Court is attempting to address that with its rocket docket order, where everything has to be appealed in 3 days and you have 24 hours for your briefs, which we've been living under those 24-hour briefing schedules now since August. And I think the Department of State has taken a very strong stance on the certification duties. So I'm, confident that any rogue, any rogue actors will be quickly brought into line. But I actually also don't expect there to be a lot of those, right? I really don't.
Right.
And I don't think I'm not expecting that to happen in the most populous counties either.
Okay, well that's good to know. I do know that about I threw that out there, the Electoral Count Reform Act, and the changes to that. That really came to post 2020, what we learned about that legal framework, about to plug in those weaknesses or the holes concerning the old law, so that state legislatures, unfortunately, or our electors were casting aside our will, the will of the people, and overruling the votes, and the results of, those votes to replace electors or even change the law. They can no longer do that under these changes. So that is something people should know with respect to those changes, and that it was a bipartisan, very much a bipartisan effort. So That's very good to know. And hopefully people feel good about that because I do, certainly. But Jill, I want to get to you. I'm sorry we've been like running over things. Certainly we all have important roles and things we're doing. I do want to talk about, myths and disinformation and kind of getting back to that because like everything we've talked about so far, I'm sure we could find something that has been incorrectly said or stated. And maybe specifically everything even to the integrity of voting machines or but maybe you can tell us about election day even at the polls, what you're doing and how you feel from the point of view of that election protection coalition group that we are prepared and should there be challenges inside the polling location or ways that we're countering mis and disinformation as well.
Yeah, so this and disinformation really is, from our perspective, what's driving a lot of this drive to challenge election results, to delay certification, and driving a lot of the political violence that we've seen. So, obviously with artificial intelligence and kind of the unfettered use of AI in a social media context, it is really hard to get a handle on how to address it, how to debunk it, how to get the good information out there. And Common Cause National has a program called Digital Democracy Activists. Basically, we recruit folks to train them to be digitally literate, to be able to identify disinformation and flag it for, our national team who can work with certain outlets to get a handle on it, get it taken down, or put tags on it to make sure that it is identified as questionable information, and also to help share reliable, accurate information in their own communities, to have those conversations with your friends and family about how to be good consumers of information online. The the important part is the kind of that human connection. Like, we can only do so much with AI and with bots that are sharing a lot of information, but having those one-on-one conversations with your friends and family, it can be challenging, but that is how we are most effectively addressing disinformation. So we do have a program, and I can drop a link. It can be anything from basic digital literacy skills to people who have more advanced skills online, and be able to kind of be more of a resource for their friends and family. Other than that, it is really important that we recognize who the trusted resources are. Department of State is the trusted resource. The counties are trusted resources. We don't want to be sharing disinformation from, some far off, source that, has questionable citations, and, it seems to be their main goal is to get you upset or get you mad. We want, the information out there that is true and accurate. So sharing that information without sharing the misinformation is really important. If you see misinformation online, don't engage with it. Don't click on it. Don't comment on it. Don't share it. But put the correct information out. If you see misinformation about drop boxes, share correct information about drop boxes. Focus on what is true without repeating the lies. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, go back to my program, the poll monitor field program. One of the things we make sure that we do is we train our poll monitors very thoroughly on what the law says. Not necessarily, we're not training lawyers or anything, but we are acquainting our poll monitors with the law so they can know if there's a problem. If they're at a polling place and everybody's being asked for voter ID, there might be a problem there. They might be just checking them in on an e-poll book, or they might actually be improperly asking people for voter ID. So we train these poll monitors to be able to identify these situations and help guide the voter through. That's the important part, is to be a resource for the voters, because voting, we say voting should be a joyous occasion, but in reality, it can be really intimidating sometimes. I mean, I do this work, I've been doing this work since 2017, and sometimes it intimidates me. I have to read my mail ballot a couple times to to make sure I do it correctly. So, we have folks out there who are watching out for voter intimidation and harassment. We have folks who are looking for mass challenges to voters on election day, people being improperly given provisional ballots when they should be allowed to vote normally. And when a voter is required to do a provisional ballot, we want to make sure that our poll monitors can help them make sure they do it properly so they can follow up and make sure that that ballot is later counted. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. We have a lot of partners that are doing work both before and after the election to address challenges and political violence and those sorts of issues. So.
Well, thank you for all that. And that actually gets me to thinking, I know we're getting close to time, and I'm sure we could talk about more things for another hour, but we don't have that time. I want to point out that you brought up like challenges at the polling locations, safety, all these things that likely, and look, I know because I led election protection and worked with you, Jill, and all that. So we're letting, whether it's the county official like Jim know, or in some cases, look, if it's a real emergency, you all do not call 866 our vote, you call 911. Okay. So just putting that out there, if it's a serious situation. I know Jim specifically, you even had, how quickly and swiftly your response was to a bomb scare at one of the locations you had. This is the world we're living in, unfortunately, but maybe you can speak to, what we should know and what you're doing as far as protecting the workers and also around, those really blatantly, usually frivolous challenges. Oh, I'm going to unmute you. You got to unmute yourself, Jim, so we can hear. There you
Sorry,
go.
I was typing a response to someone. So we're trying to work with all of our law enforcement partners, from the sheriff's department to the DA's office to the park police, security firms around here, as well as then all the local police agencies to try to be on a heightened alert, as well as train our poll workers to try to identify any kind of threat and try to turn down the temperature, as I said earlier. I feel reasonably confident that our poll workers are in a different place now than they were 4 years ago in terms of having a comfort zone with the equipment. Keep in mind, it was a perfect storm in 2020, where you were introducing all new voting equipment, vote by mail, in a high turnout presidential election all at once in a pandemic. So as I think it was Ginger Rogers who said, yeah, I did what Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels. So that's what election authorities were confronted with. As far as the security of the system, I want to remind people in Pennsylvania that 2020 was decided by 40,000 votes. 2016 was decided by 40,000. 2020 was decided by 80,000. Both of those are mountains, not molehills. And more recently, with all these new systems in all 67 counties in Pennsylvania, we've had a 2021 recount at the Court of the Commonwealth contest statewide, and it was decided by by approximately 5,000 votes, way smaller margin, and all the margins held up. And then just 6 months later, in the 2022 primary, the Republican primary between Oz and McCormick, that was decided by 900 votes statewide, another statewide recount. These are recounts that we did not have the capacity to perform with the old Danaher equipment, where you could actually look at each paper ballot, and the observers representing each of the candidates were able to see how we reconciled each ballot with any kind of questionable mark. So we've been through tight recounts. They've affirmed the accuracy of the system. And I just want to assure everyone out there that every piece of equipment that we put in a precinct, we've already put it through the paces, through logic and accuracy testing with ballots from this election to try to make sure that there is every scanner, every touch writer, every printer is going to function exactly as it's supposed to be.
And the other counties are required to do that as well, right, Jim?
They are. We take it to an extreme. We even take scanners up to our printers to make sure that as they're rolling off the presses, so we get the test decks that we use for logic and accuracy, but we take two scanners up to the printer's plant so that as they're rolling off the presses, we're testing three more from every precinct to make sure that they're going to be scannable on election day. We also do hash testing. There was a question that came up about the part verity system. And all I can tell you, it's a pipe dream. I provided a document just ahead of this meeting in anticipation of that question. Hash testing looks at basically the thumbprint or fingerprint of the software that was certified by the Federal Election Assistance Commission, and then you compare it with the software that's on your equipment. There's only one passing score, and that's 100%. We pass it every time. They've somehow perverted this and said, look, we found some software that doesn't belong. And it's on both sides of the ledger. It's in the federal cache and
Yeah.
it's in our,
I don't
it's
want to
just,
give too
it's
much
nuts.
fodder to, I think you're talking about, unfortunately, there was a recent lawsuit, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before, challenging the software to the machines that you have there in Delaware County. It really doesn't have any, I'm cautious of what we actually give fodder to or time because that again goes down that line of like mis and disinformation. But as Marian said, my gosh, Marian, you've even won an award for your work on election machine, work on the machines and everything. And so you've heard from her, you've heard from Jim and Jill too about these machines and the certification, the testing that they go through. And yes, Jim, thank you for bringing up the fact that we now have, risk limiting audits and processes that we did not have in prior elections, including one that had, former President Trump. We now have better, more secure processes than we did when he was in the previous elections when he was successful, but not even by a large margin. So now we can actually confirm that and reconcile that, and so that is a very good thing. Now I can't believe it. We're already at like time. Just very quickly, I'm going to give each of you like just, a quick moment to say, any last things that you really want people to know and feel secure about. I know you're kind of smiling because I know that's hard to do, but like Marian, maybe I'll start with you. I know. We can go a little over time.
No, and that's okay. I mean, really, we just need to focus on what's true. And the things that we know that are true is that Pennsylvania's elections are generally, by and large, run smoothly. And generally, by and large, people are able to vote. And that in the instances where there are barriers and obstacles, that the nonprofit, nonpartisan groups are there to protect the right to vote. But I always end on this. There's only one way to make sure that your vote doesn't count, and that's by not voting. So everybody get out and vote. This is not the group that I need to remind that to, but tell you this is for your neighbors and for everybody else. So, but thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Okay, Jill, I'll let you have her.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll kind of echo what Marian said. Really, protecting our elections is a group effort. We work in coalition, but we also work with community members. We count on people having these conversations. We have your conversations with your friends, have your conversations with your neighbors, your family. Talk to people, encourage them to vote. If they're repeating misinformation, and give them good information. And also want to mention that, yes, we generally do have smooth running elections, but even when things go awry, we have processes to fix that. There are many multiple checks and systems in place to make sure that even if something does go wrong, we can fix it and still get an accurate election. So.
Yeah, I think it's good to remind people that we do have that system of checks and balances, everything from like, when people say to me, well, like all these people are voting more than once. I'm like, no, well, first of all, that's illegal. But everything has a process so that that does not occur. But I always tell people we have a problem more with people not voting, which, Marian pointed out. So we got to get people out there, and please just tell them to vote. You don't really have a voice unless you use it. I do want to remind people we're going to put up the poll now that you've kind of heard all this information. Jim, I am going to get to you and your final words, but I wanted to put the poll back up and hopefully people feel a little bit better, those nerves, the anxiety. It's also just excitement, I think, because people say it's election day, but it's election season. People are already voting here in PA and other states, meaning they're filling out their ballot and returning a vote by mail ballot. May not be counted because unfortunately it can't be open till election day, but hopefully we can work on changing that. But Jim, I'm going to get to you to tell us your final words.
Well, quickly, there's a group with fever dreams still from 2020, and one of their central themes. I just want to remind everybody that if you are hit up rather with some kind of thing that sounds too crazy to be true, see if it's granular. See if there's granular detail that actually backs it up. I mean, my favorite kooky claim is that somebody with 25 V drives flipped 50,000 votes. Now think about that for a second. That would mean a V drive really represents one precinct. So are you talking about how many precincts had even 1,000 votes? Well, in Delaware County, we only had 4. If you count up all of the top 50 precincts with in-person voting, they averaged 800. And there were 40,000 votes roughly that went for Trump and about 24,000 that went for Biden out of those 60 plus thousand in those 50 precincts. How is it mathematically possible to flip? What flipped? It's hard to wrap your brain around these mathematical impossibilities, and yet they live and they live and they breathe and they walk and they talk. They're like zombies. So, and then ask yourself, if this happened, there's this wonderful thing that we have in Pennsylvania called the minority inspector, who takes home the paperwork to their home on election night for safekeeping. Here we are 4 years later, and I've yet to hear one minority inspector say, the results from my precinct were twisted. That's not what happened. 4 years. And this amazing silence from the person who's the minority in their precinct, the D in the R district and the R in the D district, and none of them have come forward. So, look for lack of specificity, and you're probably going to be able to debunk whatever comes down our pike.
And I think it's also important to remember, I've had these conversations, some of them with the people on this call, that there's often people you're just not, you could tell them a million times, they keep asking for paper ballots, and then you tell them we have paper ballots and they're still arguing for paper ballots, right? So there's a time to recognize that it's just maybe you got to step away because there isn't reality and there's not worth convincing them. But it's the people who are in between, which are the majority of voters, right? That we need to talk to and let them know, hey, I was on this program and I heard from an election director about all these great, safety measures, and legal counsel and the director of election protection about, I think I'm going to be a poll monitor, right? Because there are so many things that we can do to support the system of democracy. I just want to thank all of you. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to let people know about the poll. We are going to stay on. I know Jill, Jim, and Marian, you're welcome to stay. We kind of do this kind of like open discussion if people want to stay on. I know a lot of people have hopped off already. It is not recorded. Wow, that is so awesome. A majority of people felt confident. So that's kind of what we need to kind of get out from people. I do want to put, somebody asked about multiple votes for one person. Of course. Oh, okay. Colleen is just saying like the ballots have the unique ID number. Of course, that's what I was bringing up, Colleen. One of our state board members. She
I'm
was
sorry,
just
wait,
pointing.
can we clarify that? The ballots do not have any markings that could track back to an individual voter.
I think she means the envelope.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
The
yeah. But
envelope.
I think she's pointing out that you're not going there's a system in place to make sure there are not multiple votes. It's
Right.
kind of when we hear about ballot harvesting, which often makes me laugh because again, we have more trouble just getting access and enfranchising people than we do actually. Yeah. But it is important to remember in PA that you do have to return your own ballot. There is a very nicely improved from the Department of State and the counties, a designated agent ballot or sorry, form if you would like to help. I know I helped once my grandmother because she really needed assistance in returning that ballot. So I filled that out. But of course, somebody asked, like, what if people take multiple ballots to the post office? Well, I mean, again, the law, but like we can't be following you to the post office. I
That is
mean,
not, I have a disagreement about that. I do not believe the election code specifically says
yeah,
that.
go ahead. Tell us, Marian. Tell me.
Well, first of all, the case law that says one person may only bring back their own ballot was an in-person situation. It was bringing the
Correct.
ballot
Yep.
back to the county election office. I think there's a reading of the election code that dropping it in the mailbox that doesn't apply to mailbox. I'm not telling anybody to do this. I'm just saying there is a potential reading, and it has to be that way because otherwise, how would prisoners, how would people who live in nursing homes, how would people who live in congregate care settings get their ballot to the mail when they're physically unable to go to the post office? They have to rely on a staffer in all of those situations to bring their ballots to the mail. That's so
And there
that's
was a legal challenge, right, Marion? Like recently, I think what maybe it was Delaware County, Jim, that it was about, an elder care facility and could they, unfortunately, a lot of these are to prevent people from voting. And whether somebody who maybe was a caretaker or worked at the facility could help return multiple ballots there for the patients or the residents there and overwhelm, it wasn't even like, I can't believe it had to be litigated. But those are one of those things again that maybe was silent or not clarified, but it was very much okay that they could use the designated agent form and help the patients and residents there at the home. I don't remember
Well,
which county. Yeah, but go ahead, Jim.
there was a determination that an individual is not limited to helping just one other voter. But I want to emphasize that um, I understand what Marion's saying, and at the same time, I'm charged with informing the public of what's legal. And right now, what we're being told is that if you're going to help another person return their ballot or obtain their ballot, you need to get the designated agent form. So to be safe, uh, follow the law and make sure that you get the designated agent form that's signed by the voter to authorize you to act on their behalf.
I agree. And we had in the chat Jennifer pointing out, it was decided it is one address, it is a home, you have to be in the same household, that it says, and then so it's totally legal to help multiple residents that are in a facility. I know the league, we go out to assist people, whether it's to change and pointing out again, Marian brought it up, the last day to register, maybe you're changing your address, all those kind of things. It is coming up. It is the 21st. So please, even people tell me all the time they're so sure they're registered to vote, but maybe you haven't voted in a while. Maybe, you moved, you never updated your location, you moved within PA. If you're coming in from out of state, it's really important because then you got to do a whole registration again. You're a quote new voter in Pennsylvania. So please, yeah, Jim, thank you. He's putting in the chat, vote.pa.gov, checking that status. Do it now. Do not wait. It is so painful when I have to help people and they're like, well, I thought I was registered and it's past the registration day. So we don't want to have that. So please make sure to do that. Yeah, you can check your polling place. Also, I'm going to plug vote4on1.org, the league's one-stop shop for all your election information you need. You can even get personalized ballot information, candidate information, plan out your ballot, text it to yourself, email it to yourself. You can get that polling location, all of that good stuff on vote411.org. I mean, I was there last night. I want to tell you all a good story that I was with the Girl Scouts last night doing a presentation on, civics and elections. And it just reminded me, how important it is. And thank you to all of you for the work you're doing to, make sure that everybody has access to voting, and how excited all these young kids were to be future voters. Oh, Marian had to leave us, but I want to thank her. Also, Jill, Jim, you don't have to stay on, but if I would love it if you could. I mean, Jill, I do want to point out we'll send out to everybody 866 our vote. Jim, if you want to let people know about poll working, yeah, I think you were telling me, you will still accept people.
Yes, so even if we don't have position that's open in your specific neck of the woods, you can serve anywhere a registered voter in Delaware County can serve anywhere in Delaware County. And you can also sign up to be a standby. And as long as you don't fail to pick up our call on election day or refuse an assignment, standbys will be paid $75 for being on call to respond. And then if you do serve, you'll be paid the full amount for whatever role that you're filling based on your training. So 140 for a clerk or a machine operator or a minority or majority inspector, 240 if you also took the online training, if you then serve on election day. So $75 to be to the degree that we have positions open for that. We're still signing up, I believe. We're looking to have 100 standby poll workers for election day to address any emergency.
Yeah, and Jim, I'll point out, I get this a lot, that I have a lot of, because we have like people signing up and then they're like, I don't hear anything. Just so people are aware, this is one of, again, those limitations that you're dealing with under the law, that you may not even know where to assign them or get it approved till, what is it, 5 days, before the election. So they shouldn't like panic, if they haven't heard from you, and maybe just have some patience as you're planning all of that out, right?
Yes. So it's an interesting section of the law that it's one of those vestiges from 1937 that we'd love to have revisited.
Maybe removed. But that's just me. But yeah, thank you. Jim's putting in the chat. There's a poll worker hotline. You can go to Delco Votes. I know here in Monco, wow, the overwhelming response to people signing up. We have student poll workers as well. Actually, I have found they're the best in the precinct. And it's pretty amazing. Some of them help. They're 17. They are not even eligible to vote yet. But they just so much want to be a part of the process. So I want to thank, and I think we're going to open up. Kathy, I'll let you take over, and I'll
Yeah,
stop
thank you.
talking.
I really want to thank our presenters, even though two of them, because we went a little long, couldn't stay. But so much expertise, and we learned so much. And we also want to thank everyone who registered for this presentation. And as we stated, we'll send you the link to the recording and the additional resources that our presenters mentioned and put in the chat. And if you want to find out about future presentations by our Central Delaware County League, just check out our events calendar at lwvcdc.org. And I'm going to stop the recording now, and anyone who wants to stay and chat, you're more than welcome.